This is Futurebuilders podcast, and I'm your host, Teemu Uotila. I'm an enthusiastic future explorer working with a Finnish tech company. Together with my guests, we are building the future today. Are you in? This is Futurebuilders podcast with Vasco Duarte. He's an Agile coach and strategist. He's currently managing partner at Oikosofy, and he has a podcast, Scrum Master Toolbox. He's also the author of the controversial book, #NoEstimates, How to Measure Project Progress Without Estimates. Together with him, we will be finding out how software can grow your business, designing more impactful approach to software project management, how #NoEstimates can help you improve and transform software into a business growth factor. Welcome to Futurebuilders podcast, Vasco. Awesome to have you with us. How are you?
Thank you very much, Teemu. I'm good. Currently having a workation in Rome, working and of course also taking the time to see the sites.
Oh, okay. So it's a benefit of the job that you can do it remotely most of the time.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way.
So for those who don't know, can you give us a brief introduction on your background and yourself, and what you do and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been involved with software and product development pretty much since the beginning of my career. I started developing software as a child, maybe 13 years old, something like that. My first computer was a ZX Spectrum 48K Plus.
That's old school.
Plus, yeah, the Plus is an important addition to the description, as many ZX Spectrum fans will know. I was incredibly jealous of my friend who had an 128K Plus, which was, the best at the time. Of course, then I later on found out about Commodore Amiga 500, and then I was even more jealous. So that's how old my connection with software is. Professionally, I started in 1998 developing software, and very quickly moved on to requirements engineering and project management, which eventually led to where I am today, understanding that software is an incredibly powerful tool. It's not easy to develop, but a lot harder is to work with people.
Yeah, that's true. Humans are always a problem. You can never get rid of that. What about your education or background in that sense? Are you self-taught, or did you go to schools or anything like that?
Yeah, I did do the computer science degree, did all of the stuff, studied 3 years of math and physics and chemistry. Which one might ask, why do you need that if you're going to develop software? But hey, that was the curriculum at the time. So I spent 3 years studying everything else except software development. And then another 2 years, heads-on, 100% software development, all kinds of weird things. I learned to love math. I hated math as a kid, but through computer science, I learned to love math. My favorite topic there is information theory. I was a big cryptography buff, learning a lot about that, and eventually started working at F-Secure, which was still is, but of course at that time it was even more, a security software company developing cryptography software as well as antivirus, and these days mostly working with antivirus and network security consulting. But at that time when I joined F-Secure in 1998, they were quite famous for their antivirus, but also their SSH product, so cryptographic tunnel protocol to connect servers, and of course for admins to manage their servers securely. It's still one of the biggest, most used protocols these days, and file crypto, encrypting your files when it wasn't yet cool.
Yeah, because it was a necessary evil to be in there. So you have a background actually that you work before the dotcom bubble and before the financial meltdown of the late 2000s. How do you see did this affect the way software is built, the way products are made, or has that been pretty much the same throughout these 20 plus years?
Obviously, in the beginning of the 2000s, with the start of the Agile movement and Agile software development, later on Lean product development, with Lean startup, Lean analytics, Lean UX, and so on, there's been a huge shift on how software is built since those days. Unfortunately, not everybody's got the memo, so there's a lot of people still trying to apply the old methods, the methods that were perhaps created in the 50s and 60s. Perhaps even earlier. All old methods of software development they come from the project management world, where you have to know everything in advance before you even get started, which is a ridiculous idea, and it actually destroys a lot of value for companies to work that way, and we can dive into the details of that later on. But the big shift was in the early 2000s, and then later on late 2000s, before 2010, with the advent of Lean product development. I think those are the two biggest shifts on how we develop software and develop products these days.
So what do you see is going to be, if it's happen every 10 years, these intervals, what's the next phase going to be in your mind, or what you hoped it would be?
Yeah, so there's this very famous phrase, I think it's William Gibson, the Neuromancer author, who said it, that the future is already here, just not evenly distributed. So I would say, Lean product development is an old technology, if you will. Toyota, the original promoter, and even some argue creator of Lean product development, which was at that time called Toyota Production System, until the Americans took hold of it and renamed it to Lean manufacturing, and then later on those ideas sipped into product development, becoming Lean product development. That stuff is from the 1940s, and it became big in software in the 2000s. So we know that whatever is coming next is already here, just people don't know about it. And of course, being the author of the NoEstimates book, I would like to think that one of the biggest shifts is when we shift away from traditional project management and into flow-based and value-centric ways of developing software that I talk about in the NoEstimates book and through the NoEstimates workshops and conference talks that I've been giving over the last 7 years. Oh my God, it's been 7 years since I started that. Yeah. So maybe it's about 3 years until NoEstimates breaks out.
Yeah, that's the thing that especially in this software world and design world, people should definitely try to get away the concept of ready, that nothing is ever ready. It's always evolving. When it's actually market ready and when you can, monetize it, that's a whole different thing. But nothing gets ever, 100% ready state. They always shift and evolve and do different things. So that's definitely a mental change that many people have to, do if they want to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. What you talk about is actually embodied in one of the most popular hashtags these days in the Agile community. The hashtag is no projects. And there the idea is that successful products and of course also inherently successful businesses are never done. They're in constant evolution, right? So we shouldn't expect the software is kind of a boxed investment like a project. It's more of a continuous flow of investment that depends on the success of the product itself. The more successful the product is, the more it will receive in investment over time. So software never ends, except when it's not successful.
Yeah. When a company goes bankrupt, then it usually ends. But yeah, then it wasn't a good business proposal anyways. So you've written quite much about this hashtag NoEstimates topic. Can you give a short introduction to our listeners what it's all about?
Yeah, so NoEstimates it's kind of born from my frustrating experience in product development, specifically software-based product development. When I started to understand that a lot of the problems we were facing had nothing to do with the difficulties of developing the technological solutions, but rather that they had to do with the ways we managed the work and the investment in developing those solutions. And I started to understand that the traditional project management wasn't really adequate for software development. Maybe the biggest contrast is what we just talked about, is that software development is a flow problem. It's a constant delivery of value to the market problem. It's not the let's design it and then deliver it and then it will be successful type of problem. Because in fact, you can't know that in advance. And I think most people would agree that you can't know if a software product will be successful in advance. But there's still a lot of people believing that you know exactly what to deliver before you get started delivering it. And that goes against some of the core principles of Agile, right? Early and often delivery of running software to validate that you're delivering the right things to your customers. So NoEstimates comes from the perspective that we should be looking at software native project management methods. And of course, they should be flow-based and they should be used to protect companies from shooting themselves in the head, not the foot, by the way, because depending on the size of the project, they might actually shoot themselves in the head, literally. Yeah. So we talk about, in NoEstimates, we talk about limiting the investment, always measuring that you're delivering value and also working software, and really focusing on what I would call a software native approach to managing software delivery.
Yeah, regarding, you mentioned measuring value. How do you define that when the project is not yet ready? Do you have some methods how to evaluate the product you're doing?
Absolutely. So this actually goes to one of the core aspects of what NoEstimates is about. Like the old traditional approach is that you first decide what you want to do, whatever that might be, and for whatever reasons that those might be. Then you staff it. But before you staff it, you need to know how long and how many people. And because of that, you will start an estimation process. The estimation process, of course, assumes that you know a lot of what's going to happen. Some of the assumptions might be who will work on the project, how many people will be free, when they will be sick, what skills they have, what problems they will face. You assume the technology will not change, at least not change enough for you to have to adopt a new technology. You assume the market will not change, at least not change enough for you to change the product. So there's a lot of crazy assumptions that go into an estimation process.
Yeah, there's a lot of entropy in there.
Exactly, and a lot of unknowns and a lot of potential for catastrophic mistakes. But that's what goes into an estimation process. And then based on that, people would fund projects, right? And I think we should talk about something that concerns us, at least those of us speaking right now in the podcast. We all live in Finland, so we care for and want that country to succeed. And right now we have this amazing catastrophic example of how software is developed called Apotti, which is the National Healthcare Record Management System software, which is supposed to, of course, if you believe the hype and the propaganda, it's supposed to solve all the problems that there are in the healthcare system in Finland, which is, of course, a ridiculous proposal, a ridiculous idea. But hey, that's how it got approved. And now we have in our hands a 2.5 billion euro project with a minimum of 400 million just for the city of Helsinki, which is, for me, if you put software project and hundreds of millions in the price tag, you've already made a huge mistake, because there's no way that kind of large software project will be successful. And we know that there's plenty of data out there to propose and to show that the larger the project, the more often it goes wrong and the worse it goes. So the failure in software projects is not proportional to the size. It is disproportional, which means that if you increase the size of the project by 10%, you increase the probability of failure by much more than 10%.
Yeah.
So
and it's not even the fault of the people who are within the project. They are smart people who work in there, but it's just too much.
Absolutely. Like it's impossible for all of the people involved in failed projects to be stupid, because there's so many failed projects. So obviously we have to start looking at what are the causes for those failed projects. And I would propose and submit that size is a huge aspect of failed software projects. And in the early 2000s with Agile, we started to talk about smaller increments. Of course, these days we talk about continuous delivery, for example. So delivering working software many times a day. But even if we don't go there, I mean, I am a business owner. I would never fund a project that would not deliver working software every day. I think that would be a ridiculous idea to even get a proposal for a software project that would not include delivering working software every day. But Apot is a lot worse than that. It's been several years since the project got started. We just now recently in 2019 started to get the first deliveries of the software, which obviously and not surprisingly are harder to use, completely unreliable and full of bugs.
Yeah, and,
like no one in the software industry can be surprised by this.
Yeah, and that's definitely, whenever you see a project that says, well, this is going to cost us 400 million, then yeah, my initial gut feeling is, well, it's going to be haywire at some point because it's doomed to fail in that sense. And one other that came to mind was when this food chain Lidl, when they were doing this SAP thing, the SAP thing, they wanted to integrate SAP into their all of their functions, all of their logistics, delivery systems, and whatnot. So I think they tried it for 4 years or 5 years, something like that, and it ended up costing them 500 million euros. And after that, Lidl was, well, screw this, we're gonna cut this off because it doesn't work. That was a very ballsy move in my mind, because if you spend 500 million trying to do something, then you finally blow the whistle and say that, well, it's not gonna work. Well, someone is gonna get fired in that side of the firm, but someone should definitely get, commended about their actions, that they, blow the whistle and say that, well, we're gonna not do this anymore.
Absolutely. And you know what? The world is filled with those projects. I was working in a project at an unnamed large company where the total price was something like 90 million euros, the total cost of the project. And the project was scrapped. It was thrown in the garbage because it was a 6-month project that was 1 year late. And obviously, kind of the market moves faster than that, especially for that kind of business. That company was in a business that at that time, 2007, 2008, was changing dramatically. And of course, they weren't up to speed and eventually disappeared from the face of the earth, even though they had been the largest company in that market for many years. And in 4 years, they went from being number one to not being a factor.
Yeah, that's a huge downfall in that sense. In the no estimates philosophy, let's call it that, who do you see is the key figure in there? Is it the project manager, product manager, team as a whole, or who has the ownership of saying that we are not going to do these estimations?
Yeah, so for me, no estimates is first and foremost a business management approach, i.e., how do we decide to work on a specific software, and also when do we stop? Because it's not just how do we get started, it's also how do we follow up and when do we stop. And for me, no estimates is about giving back to the company management the control of the money that goes into a project. Let me contrast this with the old school project management. In old school project management, you give funding, you give a budget to a project. And of course, you have the governance aspect around that project. It will be the project management office overseeing and a project manager, perhaps even a program manager with several project managers working on making sure that things are going as planned. And the emphasis here is as planned, because what all they can do is check that you're spending the money at the right rate and you're declaring some requirements completed at the right rate compared to the money you're spending. Now, the problem with this, obviously, is that means nothing, because software is only valuable once it is in production. The fact that you delivered 99.9% of the requirements means absolutely zero value has been delivered if the software isn't in production. And as we know, software only shows its ugly face, i.e. the bugs and the problems, once you go into production. So that's how it used to work. That's how traditional project management looks at software delivery. And in no estimates, we say, no way we're going to do that. What we're going to do is that we're going to do incremental funding. You need a 5-year project to deliver something great. You got 5 months of money. If the project is supposed to be 2 months, then that's 8 weeks. You give the guys 1 week of time to show that they can deliver something. And that gives finally the power back to the company to decide when to stop investing in valueless or catastrophic software projects. Now, imagine if we could do this for Apottik, go back in time, and in 2012 or whenever the project was approved, we would say, okay, so you want 5 years or 6 years of money and to fund the project, great, we'll give you 6 months. And if you haven't delivered anything after 6 months, the contract says you get paid for the 6 months at a reduced rate, not the full rate, because you didn't deliver anything, and the contract is over, right? That would have been a much healthier approach for Finland and specifically for Helsinki, the first city to adopt that project, to go and protect themselves from the negative downside of a catastrophically failed software project. Yet we are not there. The whole thing was funded as one go. A private company was created to hide all possible accountability from the public eye. And we are now discovering many years later that the project is a catastrophe.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of sort of like this shared responsibility and not just billable hours. That's definitely what many of the consulting companies, at least the big consulting companies, rely upon, that they focus only on billable hours and not a product that actually serves the purpose.
Correctly.
Which is definitely a shame. You said about when talking about this about the end, how would you approach it? Would you create many different smaller companies that would have developed it simultaneously, each of their own vertical, or what would you think is the best way of moving forward with that?
Okay, so I think before we go into that, it's important that we recognize that software has become so big that it's starting to have a social impact. And Apottik being one case, but there are many other cases that people have in mind, I'm sure. Apottik's cost means 2.5 billion in total when the whole thing is delivered, 400 million for Helsinki alone. That means that there are schools that are not built, roads that are not repaired, trains that are not purchased, bus drivers that are not paid, nurses that don't get hired or trained. That's what we are talking about. It is no longer about software. It's no longer about project management. What we are talking about here is heavy social impact. So when we start from that perspective, I would say that it is incredibly irresponsible to start that kind of projects, because building software is not like building a road. Road projects also get late, and they can even get very late. I mean, just look at the Brandenburg Airport in Berlin, which was supposed to be open in 2011. Today is 2019, and it's still not open. So construction projects also get catastrophically late. But in software projects, that's not an accident. That is a near certitude when we talk about large software projects. So when we think about it from that perspective, I would say, as a taxpayer in Finland or any other country, I want my government to do only exclusively micro incremental funding, even for large projects. What does that mean? What does incremental funding mean? That doesn't mean you will not necessarily put up a bid for a large project. You could put up a bid for a 2.5 billion project, but you're never, ever going to contract that amount at the start. You're going to contract a payment. Exactly. You're going to contract a payment schedule against the proof of value delivered. Apottik could have been delivered in many small increments. We know how to do that in software. It's not rocket science. We can take an old system and separate it from other systems through an API wrapper, and from then on incrementally change the old system with the new technology and with the new functionality, so that the users don't even need to change the user interface they use to access the system, which is, by the way, one of the largest consequences of the Apottik system, which we aren't even talking about, which is that you will have to retrain tens of thousands of people to use that system. That costs money. We're not talking about that. That's not even in the original budget, by the way. So let's think about how do we go from this, all in, get all or get nothing type of project funding and going to this incremental funding so that we don't get to the point where we stop having money to pay nurses because we're trying to put a software into service that should have been there to help nurses, right? That this is a ridiculous proposal that we are going through now in Finland, but other countries are going through the same.
Yeah, that's a quite interesting area that I always thought about myself, as I also work in tech industry, and whenever we do a project or product, whatever, the customer they always want to slash the UI and UX budget first and not touch the software development budget at all. Well, while in my mind, I mean, you can save the software cost by doing good UI and UX also. So it's sort of like it's a disconnect in my mind. But how do you perceive that?
Yeah, I think that the separation between usability and technology is artificial, and it's only possible because we have people who don't develop software planning these software deliveries, right? We have project managers who never coded one line of code that are now designing how we are going to deliver software. Having been a software developer and understanding how hard it is to develop software, I can safely say that I would never trust myself to decide how software should be developed, even in a project where I would be the project manager. That's why that's why we need incremental delivery, because software has so many unknowns, technology dependencies. Sometimes you plan on using a certain technology and the vendor of that technology goes belly up. You don't have the possibility to use that technology anymore. And now you need to redesign that whole component or set of components that depended on that technology. So, there's so many unknowns in software development. That's why it's so incredibly important to do the development incrementally, including the whole chain end to end. So obviously also the user experience and the user interface, because without that, you don't actually have software, right? Yeah. Like, we're not only developing back-end database management software, we're developing stuff that will be used by human beings. If they are not involved in the process, we're surely going to fail.
Yeah. If you look back then 15 years and try to do a retrospective on that time frame, do you think people are getting better evaluating their own competencies, or has that remained same? People always over evaluate their capabilities and under evaluate their colleagues' competencies.
Now, I don't know, what context you're referring to. Now, if I talk specifically about our competencies to deliver software projects on time, I would say we are still greatly and catastrophically over evaluating our ability to deliver software on time.
Yeah, that was our
target. There's plenty of examples. Hertz, the car rental company, just fired Accenture. Because Accenture was supposed to deliver their
this booking system,
booking system, right? The booking system that was supposed to be used first in the US and then rolled out to all countries for that specific brand. And Accenture, catastrophically failed to deliver, and then started even telling Hertz, the client, that, oh, if you want that change, you need to pay more. Oh, if you want that change, you need to pay more. This is old school project management. This is project management as badly done in the 1970s. Yeah. And we're still using that kind of project management technology today of charging extra for changes. Well, I got news for you guys. Agile was there exactly to give you changes for free. If you're not taking advantage of that, I think you've missed the boat.
Yeah. And I think Hertz actually filed a suit against them for 30 million or something like that.
And I hope many more of those lawsuits come up, because that will legally and through the institutions institutionalize the need to have incremental funding, continuous delivery of software, and fundamentally agile ways of working when it comes to developing and delivering software.
Yeah. If you look at, then let's take a project team, for instance, how do you see the future of teams? Do you see that physical teams will actually be replaced by virtual teams? Does it actually work as well or as efficiently?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, by the way. And it's also very much a William Gibson type question, right? The future is already here, just not evenly distributed. I mean, both you and I live in Finland, so we're probably very familiar with the amazing contribution to software, to the software world that Finland has done, not the least of which Linux, the operating system by Linus Torvalds, a student at the Helsinki University who started this project that we now know as Linux. And it is, by the way, currently the most used operating system in the world. And let's not forget that 20, 30 years ago, people would laugh at Linux and say that it will never become big. Well, now it's the biggest. It's the big gorilla in the room. And when you think about Linux as an example of software development, it is a completely 100% distributed software development process without any managers except those that approve the changes to the code. That's Linus Torvalds himself and a couple of other 7 to 10, I guess, other trusted lieutenants, as he calls them, that approve changes to the software basis that becomes the Linux kernel, which is then massively distributed all over the world. All of the other things that get shipped with Linux, all of the other software packages that go together with Linux to make the famous distributions like Fedora Linux would be, or Debian Linux, or all of that. All of those are also created by wildly distributed teams without any specific or structured management infrastructure there. So I would say that looking at it from a William Gibson perspective, the future of software development is volunteer as well as employed, wildly distributed teams that coalesce, that come together specifically to solve concrete and measurable business problems. Now, for a small company, that may mean having 4 or 5 people co-located in the headquarters and a couple of guys all over the world contributing. For a large company, it may mean having all of their employees coming together on a need basis to form small teams to solve specific business problems. All of this is already happening, by the way. If you just look for it, you will find it. We have companies like Automatic, the company that produces WordPress, which runs 30% of the internet websites, by the way, which is a completely distributed software company. So I would say that software is going to be mostly produced by distributed teams and distributed groups of people that come together when necessary to solve specific problems. And there will be many, many small co-located teams working for smaller companies, but they will use, when necessary, distributed talent. So my expectation is that the bigger the company, the more distributed the teams. And for small companies, even those, they will use distributed talent for specific problems that they need to solve.
Yeah, so basically teams will form on ad hoc basis and solve the problem and then disband until needed again. In some scenarios.
I think I would say that would be probably the most common way of working. But of course, there will continue to be fully co-located teams working on specific problems with a very structured management infrastructure in place and so on. But I would say that the bias, the balance will be towards distributed teams.
Yeah. By the way, how about yourself? How do you educate yourself? How do you learn stuff? Do you look what other people's are coding or developing, or how do you learn?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I thought about it once I read the question before we started recording. And maybe a short way to introduce this is that I mostly work with businesses where software is a critical part of their value delivery, right? Where basically they're product companies that need software to deliver value to their customers. And as I work with these companies, I have found out that the majority of the problems that I have to deal with as a consultant is actually solving business problems for those companies using software. So, of course, my critical skill is on the software side, product development with software. But I have started already for 4 years now to work with companies to solve their business problems, thinking about business goals, thinking about software-based strategies to implement their business strategy. And what I've learned is that the best way to do that in business, the best way to find solutions that work is to always try new things, keep what works. In fact, not just keep, but amplify, improve what works, forget what doesn't work. Don't spend any minute thinking about what didn't work. And especially do not worry about theory. Theory is very often wrong when it comes to business. By the way, that's also the core of the scientific process we don't talk about. The core of the scientific process is that theory will be wrong. It's just a question of time until we find a better theory that is less wrong, right? And what matters in the end for business, for my clients, and for myself, my own business, is results. What I find is that people talk too much. We should be trying a lot more. Small experiments focused on delivering value to us and to our customers, and then quick iterations to learn and adapt. So that's how I have started since I started my career as a consultant in 2014. That's how I started to learn, because I had to face new problems every time. Every business that I work with has a different type of problem. Of course, there's some tools that work across many businesses, but they have different problems. They're mostly business problems, and you can't design your way into solving a business problem. You have to try, you have to experiment your way into solving a business problem. So that's how I learn these days.
Yeah, so to me it seems that you are more inclined towards evolution than creating a revolution whenever you learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that there's plenty of evidence out there that in order to be successful over time, evolution is the way to go. I mean, we are human beings talking over Skype, right? I think we are the evidence that evolution works.
Definitely for thousands of, or at least 1,000 miles away, roughly. Yeah,
absolutely.
You work with many clients and helping them to implement better software delivery process, etc. How would you describe what is, in your point of view, what would be a dream customer? What are the characteristics and features that customers should have?
Yeah, so for me, the one characteristic that my best clients have is that they understand and act like it. So not just they know it, but they also act that way. They act like software is a business amplifier. Software is something that they can use to grow their business, to make their business more successful. In my company, we call those clients software-powered businesses, where software has such an impact that if it would stop working, the business would stop working, or at least it would stop growing, right? So software acts as an amplifier of their business models, and therefore also an amplifier of their success. And what I see is that the best clients that depend on software and create value with software, they create small or relatively small, 5 to 15 people, cross-functional teams with end-to-end responsibility. And I don't mean just software development end-to-end, I mean business end-to-end, where you have, for example, product managers and even business unit owners or business unit heads part of the team. And then they have, of course, a strong technical team there to deliver on the growth that they are looking for. But they look at software development as a process of amplifying their business, of growing their business, not as a process of delivering more technology. And when I work with these clients, they give me business challenges or goals, and they ask me to help their teams to focus on the business challenges and the business goals they have using software as the tool, but not to develop software, rather to increase the success of their business, to grow their revenues or grow their user acquisition or grow their conversion rate, whatever that is. I was working with a client where we had a 2-week project, and it was really just 2 weeks. It was time boxed. That was all the time we had. And we were given a goal at the start that was to increase conversion, which we succeeded at. But just to give you kind of the short of the story, in 2 weeks, we went from having a business goal to having software out that over a year generated €500,000 in incremental revenue. And you know how powerful it is for a team, right? They deliver the product, and after they deliver, they can go to the CEO, tap their shoulder and say, hey, Jeff, we paid your salary this year.
Yeah, that's definitely, if you can create 500,000 with 2 weeks of work, then that's in my book, that's a huge success.
And that's the core of what software is there to do. It is to create this massive amounts of value from small changes, not, and this is the problem with traditional project management, not tiny amounts of value from massive investments. Software is inherently a 10x technology. Software makes sense where you expect a very high return. Do not, and this is what I tell all of my clients, do not use software if you're looking for a 1% increment in revenues, because software is extremely unreliable, extremely problematic, requires lots of talent, and it can fail so easily that if you're not expecting to get at least 10 times more than what you're ready to invest, software is the wrong technology.
Yeah,
it's a wrong
tool
for that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree on that. Outside of coaching and software, what do you do on your spare time? Like now you're in Italy. What do you do except of attend a podcast?
Yeah, and work while you're in Rome instead of seeing the site. So I have a very, very boring life. I love my work. I travel a lot for work. So obviously, when I travel, it's not only pleasure, although it is also pleasure, but it's also a responsibility and a stress. I do have my annual vacation with the kids. We go to Portugal, which is where I'm from, and we spend a whole month just being with the family and taking in the sun, walking in the mountains, going to the beach. But what I like to do is always look for new ideas on how to make myself and my clients' business succeed. I happen to believe that people exist in their relationships. I exist in the relationships I have with my family, my friends, and of course also my clients. I don't think we live in a world of abstract platonism, right? This, what you would call a world of experiences where you read a lot and then you're happy. Yeah. No, I don't believe in that. I believe in doing. I believe in getting out there and failing. I failed many times. That's the only way I learn. And I failed in my own business. I failed in projects with clients, but I've also succeeded. And when I succeed, I typically have a huge impact in my own business and the business of my clients, because I've learned a lot. I've collected a lot of hands-on knowledge, stuff that comes from doing stuff, not from just reading books, which of course I do read, but I spend most of my time thinking about, what things to try. In my own company, we run 3 to 4 business experiments per week. My coaching clients, they get access to that library. We have a library of over 300 business experiments that they can, mine and try to find out ideas for their own businesses. So I believe that the way we change the world is through action, and especially in business, through entrepreneurs. I believe that entrepreneurs change the world, and I look at myself as an entrepreneur. I don't expect politicians to make my world better. I expect my clients, the businesses I work with, to make my world better, and I also expect that from my own business, and that's what I want to do. So I would say that if we want a better world, we must act, not discuss. And for me, business is about improving the world. That's what I like to think about. The role of business is to make the world slightly better by helping someone solve a problem they have.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. We shouldn't wait for governments or politicians to get on board, because they always come too late, in a sense that companies and organizations and people by themselves need to, drive these changes onwards. If we wait for some government entity to do something, it's most likely going to be way too late to act upon it, unfortunately. Because in Finland, we definitely have this huge government, as you know.
Yeah, I mean, Finland is not even the worst country in Europe when it comes to that, but it's getting pretty bad, I have to say.
Yeah, so as long as the government stays out of the business side, and that everything should work well. And if people want to contact you or hear more about you, where they can find more info?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way to contact me is just through Twitter. It's at Duarte_Vasco, and I guess you guys will put the link in the show notes. Yeah. Then also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I found LinkedIn to be the most productive social network out there. First of all, because it's mostly about the stuff that I care about, how to solve problems that businesses have, but also people tended to be much more, goal-oriented when interacting with others on LinkedIn. It's not so much like, here's the sandwich I'm having or something like that. So I like LinkedIn because of that. And of course, if you want to read more about the NoEstimates ideas and the book itself, you can go to noestimatesbook.com.
Yeah. And I also agree on LinkedIn that it's the best social platform, or sort of like this so-called social platforms out there, because people don't send picture of their foods or get likes from their friend circles who they don't even know, like in Facebook. So yeah, LinkedIn is the best, because it focuses on, like you said, businesses and solving these real world problems that can save some people jobs and create new jobs.
Absolutely. I want to emphasize what you just said. It focuses on real world problems. I like that, because for me, that's what business is about. It's about solving real world problems. Excellent.
Well, Vasco, thanks for joining us, and we'll put this on the show notes, all of this stuff. And since you're in 10 minutes time, you need to be elsewhere, so I'm going to let you go. And great to have you here. Maybe we can do this another time also.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, Teemu.
Yeah, thank you. You just listened to Future Builders podcast with Vasco Duarte, talking about NoEstimates philosophy. Join the discussion and follow us on social media. You can find us by using keyword Future Builders, and visit our website, wearefuturebuilders.com. If you have any questions, recommendations, or you want to be our guest, please drop us an email, team@wearefuturebuilders.com.